those that are taking it for credit, the questions for chapters 3 through 6, those will be due next Tuesday, Lord willing. So, because we should finish that up, hopefully get past that tonight. But so those will be due next week, and then I gave you some new ones tonight. Those will be due the week after. So, okay, are we going, Lauren? Okay. All right, so we are ready to begin in chapter 5 tonight. So hopefully you guys have been reading ahead. As I said, well, obviously we don't have time to read through. I wish we did, but so hopefully y'all are reading ahead, so you've got some idea what's in this chapter. So again, we're going to hit some of the highlights here. And so let's take a look at the first 3 verses in chapter 5. This is where we talked last week or week before last about God, of course, has called Moses to go talk to Pharaoh and release the Israelites. We talked about how Moses made a lot of excuses, 4 different excuses where he tried to get out of it. God said, nope, you're my man. You're going to do this, and Aaron's going to help you. And so that's where we left off. So here in chapter 5, somehow we see that Moses and Aaron are granted an audience with Pharaoh, and they request, and notice the first request, it's a pretty reasonable, they're not asking Pharaoh to, hey, let all the slaves go permanently. They make a reasonable request. They say, look, will you let us go into the wilderness so we can worship God? We can make our sacrifices and we can worship God. We just want to go into the wilderness to do that. Now, how do we know that that's a reasonable request? Well, we do have the Egyptians kept records on a lot of different things, and they had, among their records, they had work journals. And so the Hebrews are slaves, but they had others as well. And so we notice from their records that there were a lot of times where workmen were given a leave to go sacrifice to their gods. So not just the Hebrews, but whoever else. So it was not unusual to make that kind of request. It had been done before. And so God really starts out with a very reasonable, knowing, of course, Pharaoh's not even going to go along with this, but this was not something outrageous or ridiculous for him to ask to do that. Well, Pharaoh, his response, he just kind of arrogantly scoffs. And so we notice there in verse 2, and Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go? So he's mocking. He's like, who is this God of yours that I shall listen to him? I don't care what your God says, because, of course, this is not one of the Egyptian gods that Pharaoh would have been concerned with. So he scoffs about that, and, of course, he has no intention of letting them do this. And it may be that Pharaoh is thinking in his mind, because the Israelites are slaves, what would that say about their God? In his mind, maybe. What would he think? Well, you worship this God and you guys are slaves, therefore, is your God strong or weak? Your God's weak. I mean, he can't even keep you out of slavery. Why should I listen to him? So things like that might have been going through his mind, but it's obvious that he had no respect for God. He doesn't care anything about that. So, as we go on in verses 4 through 14, we notice that Pharaoh, in his response, he basically says that, so you guys, you want to go out in the wilderness and you want to worship your God, and how do you have time to even think of this stuff? I know what the problem is. You boys aren't working hard enough. You got too much free time on your hands so you can be thinking about, oh, we need to go out and sacrifice to our God. So maybe, if you're Pharaoh, how do you solve that problem? Yeah, give them more work to do, right? And so you've seen a lot of people throughout history have that basic response when people get ill at ease. They go, well, you just don't have enough to do. You got too much spare time where you're thinking up these ideas. And so he is going to drastically increase their workload. So you don't have time to go out in the wilderness and sacrifice to your God. You don't need to be worried about stuff like that. So we notice here in verse 6 if I can find it. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers. So that's kind of interesting. And the officers, if you look in verses 14, 15, and 19, those officers, they're called officers of the children of Israel. Okay? So what that means is they were fellow Hebrews. That's who they were. And we see this all over the globe in a slave system. For example, in the United States, you had certain African slaves who were elevated above the other African slaves, and they would be like overseers, and they got a little bit better treatment, but their job was to keep all the rest of the slaves in line and make sure they were doing what they were supposed to do. So apparently that's the case here. So some of the Hebrews had been elevated above the others, and so this is who he's talking about. Okay? And so up to this point, the slaves, they had been making bricks, and one of the ingredients you need for that is straw. And so they had been provided with all the ingredients, and they simply had to put it together and make the bricks. So now Pharaoh is going to say, well, instead of us providing the straw for the Israelites, let's make them go get it themselves. So you boys you're going to have to go out and gather up your own straw. We've been providing that up till now, but we're not going to do it anymore. So you still have to make the bricks, but now you got to go gather the straw as well. Well, what's that going to do for them?
Create more work.
More work, yeah, and more time, right? So obviously, Pharaoh, being the reasonable person he is, I'm sure he'll lower the amount of bricks they have to make, right? Nope. You got to make the same amount of bricks, but now instead of having the straw right there, you got to spend the time to find the straw and still find enough time to make the same amount of bricks that you've been making. Okay? So it would be like, if I'm mixing concrete for somebody, you need water for concrete. If everybody, all my supplies were given to me, I can make a certain amount of concrete. But if suddenly somebody said, well, from now on, we're not going to give you the water. You're going to have to go find your own water. So I got to go find water, find a way to transport it, bring it back here, mix it up. That's going to take a lot more time. I can't possibly make the same amount of concrete that I was making before. That would be unreasonable. Well, that's what Pharaoh does. So yeah, I expect you to make the same amount, but now you got to go find the straw. Okay? Now, something interesting, if you notice in verse 8, there in chapter 5, it says, and the tail of the bricks, which they didn't make heretofore, you shall lay upon them. The tail of the bricks. So what does that mean? That's an interesting phrase. Do what? Yeah. So this is simply the count or the number of bricks, the tail of the bricks. How many bricks? So he said it's not going to change. You still have to make the same quota or the same count of bricks. Okay. Now, something interesting that we, at least me anyway, maybe not y'all, but we use a lot of words. We use a lot of phrases in our vocabulary. And you never really stop to think about, why do we call this person that? Where does that phrase come from? And sometimes I get curious and think, yeah, why do we use that? So I didn't know this. I was researching all this. And in Old English, this phrase to tell meant to count. So we would say, oh, well, you're going to tell somebody. Well, that just means you're going to talk to somebody. But what used to mean, that means you're going to count. Okay? And so that's where we get the term, you go to the bank, and the person behind the window, what are they called? The teller. Well, I never really thought, why do we call them a teller? Because a teller used to be a counter. So they count the money. They're the teller. So that's where bank teller comes from. But that's what tail of the brick means. How many bricks are you still going to be expected to make? Which was the same as they'd made before they had to go find the straw. Now, something else in verse 9 that's interesting. Pharaoh says, let their more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein. Notice this, and let them not regard vain words. Okay? What does vain mean? Empty, useless, meaningless. So, let them not regard vain words. Who do you think he's talking about? The vain words of who?
Hebrew.
the Hebrews, the slaves. He said, don't listen to vain words of who? Moses and Aaron, right? So in other words, he's accusing Moses and Aaron. They didn't really talk to God. They're lying to you. Don't listen to them. You're not going to be liberated. Your God's not going to do anything. They didn't even talk to him. Okay, that's what Pharaoh is trying to convey. They're lying to you, and you should just ignore them. Because he could tell, obviously, Moses and Aaron were getting everybody stirred up. He's like, just ignore them. Forget everything they say. Don't think about it. Now, the obvious thing is going to happen. They still are supposed to make a certain amount of bricks, but now they got to get the straw. What's going to happen? Can they meet their quota? No, they can't. They can't possibly make the same amount of bricks when they're running all over the countryside trying to gather up straw, which used to be placed right there before them. They can't possibly make the same amount of bricks, so they're going to fall short of their quota. And so Pharaoh is going to have their officers beaten for this. Every time you miss a quota, you people are going to get beaten, severely beaten, because you're not working as hard as you need to work. So we see then in verses 15 through 19, so the officers, they in turn complain to Pharaoh. Okay, and they're simply, of course, the quotas are impossible. You got to cut us a break here somewhere. It's not that we're not working hard or we don't want to do what you're telling us to do, but it's physically impossible. We just can't meet the quota with this larger workload. Well, how do you think he responds to that? Yeah, he has no sympathy for them. I don't care. Quit coming to me with your excuses. Get to work. So he's not interested in the fact that, and he probably knows they can't meet the quota, but he doesn't care, right? Because he's punishing them because they asked him to be allowed to go out and make these sacrifices. So it becomes obvious to the officers that, well, we're not going to get any sympathy from Pharaoh. He's not going to do anything to help us out. We're certainly not going to get any relief or any mercy from him. So then in verses 20 through 23, now that they've got this increased workload and the officers and the Hebrews that have been set above the other Hebrews, they're being beaten for this and punished even though they can't do anything about it. They can't do anything to Pharaoh. They just have to take it from him. So what do you think they will do? Who will they take it out on? They're going to take it out on Moses and Aaron. This is all your fault. You boys come in here spewing all this stuff. Oh, God's going to take us out of here, and you feed us all this stuff, and all you've done is make it worse. We had a lot of work to do before, but now it's just absurd, and that's your fault because you've made Pharaoh mad. Thanks a lot, boys. Appreciate your help. That's kind of the reaction that they're going to get. So if that was Pharaoh's goal, and maybe it was, he was certainly successful. Hey, if I could turn everybody against Moses and Aaron, well, he does a good job of that, because we read that in here that's exactly what happened. So they're going to blame Aaron and Moses for their increased workload, their increased suffering. You guys said God was going to make it better, and it's only gotten worse. That's what we get for listening to you. Okay, so whether Pharaoh did that deliberately or not, it worked. Okay, but think about that today. That's typical of a lot of people, right? When we think about what we want from God, if we think we're going to get something or we should get something, for them, oh, well, we're going to get out of here, right? Well, when did they assume they were going to get out? Right away. Well, that's today, right? Right? God's going to take us out of here today, right? Is that what God said? He didn't say it'd be immediate. He just said, I am going to take you out. When? When he's good and ready, right? It's not up to them. So, but when their release was not immediate, when it was not painless, when it was not easy, then they start griping and whining and complaining. And a lot of people do the same thing today. When we think, well, this should work out easy for me, and it doesn't. Why can't God help me out here? Why can't he cut me a break here? So there's a lot of people that will do the same thing. Now, what they should have done, just like you and I should do, is be patient. Now, is that easy to do? A lot of times it's not, but God never said it would be easy. So we need to have some patience. Trust God to do what he needs to be done in his own time. He's not going to operate according to my timetable. He's going to operate according to his, and I need to be patient with that. Why is his timetable better than mine? Yeah, because he knows everything. Are y'all insinuating that I don't? Yeah, I know next to nothing, right? God knows there's nothing God doesn't know. So I need to trust him. Go, you know what? His plan's probably a whole lot better than mine. Let's just let this play out. And that's what they needed to do because God had told them, and Moses had told, look, he's going to release you. He didn't say when, but he said he would do it. You need to trust in God that he's going to do it. So everybody starts yelling and screaming at Moses and at Aaron. And so Moses, as you can imagine, when he goes in to do this, and this is what happens, Pharaoh basically hits him in the face, and now his fellow Hebrews are hitting him in the face. He gets very, very discouraged. And you can understand why. So Moses has got to be thinking, ever since I got involved in this, do you think Moses loves his people? I'm sure he does, right? So he's thinking, all I've done, they're right. All I've done is I've made it worse. That's all I've done. I wanted to help, and I've put this extra burden on my own people. So you can kind of imagine how down he was. This is not working at all like I thought it was going to work. Well, it's working according to who thought it was going to work. God thought this is exactly the way it's supposed to work. But Moses doesn't fully understand that. So if you notice there at the end of the chapter, in those last couple of verses, Moses returned to the Lord and said, Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? Why did you even send me here? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people. And notice this, neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. You said you were going to deliver. You said you were going to free but you haven't. Yes.
He didn't listen when God said that you're going to do all these signs before Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And then I'll let.
Yeah. He needed to know, and he will get it as we go through. But at this point, he's not getting that I got this, Moses. I got it, but we've got to do it a certain way. Of course, Pharaoh's going to resist. I always knew he would resist, and it's going to give God a chance to show his power. So it's all going to work, but it ain't going to happen today. So relax, right? So the key word that Moses left out when he said, you haven't delivered the people, a key little 3-letter word. Begins with a Y and ends with a T. Yet. God is like, you should have said, I haven't delivered them yet, but I will. But Moses, you just haven't delivered. Well, I'm going to, but yeah, it's not going to be today. There are still going to be some obstacles to overcome. So it's all working according to God's plan, but Moses is very dejected at this point.
This is like making a cake using a box cake mix.
Yeah.
Moses just now opened the package. God's fixing to show him how to mix it.
He's fixing to show him how to do it. Right. Because I might can follow the directions on the box, but I'm probably going to mess it up unless somebody really shows me how to do it, right? So yeah, God's in charge and he's going to do this. But at the same time, from a human, we can see why Moses is discouraged. But his faith will be built up as he goes along. But at this point, Moses, maybe this is, in his mind, he's probably thinking, see, Lord, I told you I wasn't the man for the job. I told you, even though God said, if God said I'm the man for the job, then I'm the man for the job, right? But he's probably thinking that. I knew I couldn't do this. This is all, terrible. Well, a lot of people are are short-sighted like that, even today, and we think that God should do things our way. We pray to something and we don't immediately get the answer we're looking for, and people are, why didn't God listen to my prayer? Well, who said he wasn't listening? Maybe the answer is a little different than but again, he knows more than we do. So if we look at Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, I think I got that up there, yeah. Every verse in the Bible is important, okay? But this one, we ought to really keep this in mind. God said, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." If we would always keep that in mind, it would help us get a little more patient, a little more, okay, this is going to work out the way it's supposed to work out. I'm going to try to do my part, but I'm going to let God do his part. And we'd be better off. So God's plan is working here just like God wanted it to. They needed to have faith. They needed to have some patience. Is God going to keep his promise? Of course he will. God will always keep his promises. He keeps his promises to us. So I am told by God that if I am faithful to him, I'll get to heaven. Well, is that today? When will that be? Who knows? Either I have faith in God or I don't. If I got faith, I mean, you know what? Whenever I get to heaven, I get to heaven. But I know I'm going. As long as I'm faithful to him, I'm going. Why? Because he promised me that I would. It doesn't matter if it's today, next week, 10 years from now, whatever. Whenever it is on God's timetable, but I know he'll keep his promise. So we got to have that faith and that promise. And God's going to keep his promises here. Well, let's go to chapter 6. And so in these first verses, we see here that God reassures Moses that he will indeed deliver the Israelites from bondage. He's going to do it. But it's got to play out a certain way. And he tells Moses here something real interesting that he says, because of how he's going to smite Pharaoh and Egypt, because of the things he's going to do, you're going to be amazed at how this is going to work out. And he said, because of what I'm going to do to them, there's going to come a day, it's not today and not next week, a little ways down the road, but God tells Moses there's going to come a day, not only is Pharaoh going to let you go, but what? Yeah, you won't leave empty-handed either. He's going to beg you to leave. Take your stuff and get out. And here's some more stuff to take with you. Right? Just go. So he said, yeah, there's going to come a day you're going to leave and he's going to be pushing you out the door because of what I'm going to do to him. So just trust me, trust the process. This is going to work. It was all part of God's plan. So Pharaoh is going to resist, but that resistance was needed for God to be able to fully show his power. Now, show his power to who? Well, Moses, Aaron, his people, and everybody, right? So God is going to demonstrate his power to the Israelites and to the Egyptians. But if Pharaoh had agreed right off the bat, none of that would have taken place. So it's all according to plan. God knew, he's not making Pharaoh resist, but God knew that he would, and it's going to give him the opportunity to do these things, showing them, which they will come to believe, that no man or government is able to resist God. That will be clear when you go through all this stuff. Now, we see in this last part of verse 3, this is kind of hard to understand when you read this. And I appeared unto Abraham and unto Isaac and unto Jacob by the name of God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah was I not known to them. And you can look at different commentaries and biblical scholars, and there's a lot of disagreement So I'm not going to pretend to you, oh, I know exactly what this means. If this is a difficult, what do you mean that they didn't know you? Because especially if you go back and read Genesis, Moses called God Jehovah in Genesis. And yet he's saying, well, they didn't know me by that name. But Moses did that. Well, what about that? When did Moses write Genesis? While all that stuff was happening, or did he write it later? Yeah, he wrote it later. So he knows, right? But, well, did they not know God? Well, of course they knew God. But it may have meant some of the suggestions here were maybe the patriarchs knew the name, but they didn't fully understand the character of God, the significance of God. A lot of people seem to think maybe that's what it means. People smarter than me, they just didn't fully understand the significance. So that's a possibility, or maybe not. Again, they didn't understand the character of God. So it's hard to know for sure. And I did a lot of research on that, and depending on which scholar you look at, they'll give you a different answer. So not really sure about this, but something along those lines. I mean, obviously they knew God, but probably they didn't understand fully his character. But all that's going to come out with all these plagues that God is going to. So everybody's going to know who I am when I do all this stuff. Yes. Yeah.
Because to the patriarchs, he just spoke to them directly. There's not really miracles.
Right.
This is the first time, really, other than creation.
And nobody was around at the creation. Yeah. So yeah, they're going to see the power of God with all these plagues that he's going to present, which the patriarchs did not see. So I think that's a good way to look at that. Right? Because obviously they knew God, but they've not seen him do this. Okay. And so another reason, guys, I don't, it's not as good if Pharaoh agrees right off the bat. I need to be able to demonstrate these things. So I know this is a man who's going to be stubborn, and he's going to give me the opportunity to do this. And that's what he's going to do. So it's all going according to his plan. Now, God makes some more assurances to Moses. And he tells Moses the following things. He says, I will deliver the Israelites. Of course, I said I would, and I will. It's not going to be today, but I am going to do it. I will deliver them. He assures Moses that I will make them my people. They will be my people. Not maybe, but they will be my people. And then he assures Moses that I'm going to fulfill the promise I made to Abraham. I'm going to bring them to the land of Canaan, the promised land. Just like I told Abraham I would, and Isaac and Jacob, I'm going to fulfill. And again, what about Abraham? He made that promise to Abraham. Did Abraham live to see it? Nope. But did God fulfill it? We know now because we're looking at it past tense. God fulfilled the promise, but Abraham never saw it. But Abraham had faith that God was going to do what he said. It just wasn't going to be today or this week or in the immediate future, but he will do it. So he assures Moses, I'm going to do all of these things. I said I would, and I will. Okay, but you've got to have that patience that I'm going to do everything that I said. So he goes on then to talk about his these plagues, the things that he's going to do, his miraculous judgments against Egypt. God tells Moses they're designed to do three things. Okay, number one, these are going to be designed to convince the Israelites that I am the true God, the one and only God. All the Egyptian gods are false. And that's going to be a theme as we go through. We're going to talk a lot about the Egyptian gods. And so he wants to convince the Israelites he is the true God. Okay, secondly, he's going to show the Egyptians that God, is greater than all of their gods. Their gods will have no power to stop any of the things that God's going to do. Why didn't they stop these plagues? Because they can't, because they don't exist. So God says, I'm going to use that to demonstrate that to the Egyptians. And then thirdly, It's to demonstrate the concept of righteous judgment against wicked people. So God's going to be able to demonstrate righteous judgment against wicked people. So Moses goes back to the people. God convinces him, okay, so go back and talk to him and tell him again. So Moses goes back again to talk to the people. But notice there in verse 9, and Moses spake so unto the children of Israel. He told them what God said. But they hearkened not unto Moses for anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. So in other words, they didn't believe it. Yeah, that's what you already told us we were going to get out of here. And not only are we still here, but now we're working twice as hard as we were before. So they don't believe him. They've rejected it. So obviously they believe basically that Moses is a liar at this point, which is what Pharaoh had tried to convince them of. So that is working at the moment. So God tells Moses in verses 10 through 13, well, I want you to go speak to Pharaoh again. Moses is still discouraged, of course, so he basically says to God, well, even my fellow Israelites, they're not going to listen to me. Why would Pharaoh listen to me? I don't get the point. I'm not able to convince anybody. My own people won't hear me, then Pharaoh's not going to hear me. So why do you want me to go back and talk to him again? But of course, he's going to go back, and now the message has changed. So that first request, well, just let us go out and worship. Well, now the message has changed. Now it's Moses. He asked if they could go out and worship. Now he's to demand that Pharaoh let him go. So Moses, I'm not in any position to demand, but that's what God tells him to do. Knowing that Pharaoh's going to resist, but he's going to make that demand. You got to let us get out of here. So now something interesting in verse 12. Moses spake before the Lord, saying, behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. How then shall Pharaoh hear me? Who am I of uncircumcised lips? What in the world? What does that mean? I'm uncircumcised lips. Well, think what this means. We see in some other places, we see a similar terminology. So if we were to go to the book of Jeremiah, you see Jeremiah talked about uncircumcised ears, meaning ears that can't or won't hear. Okay? He also talked about uncircumcised hearts, hearts that refuse to understand. So what do you think uncircumcised lips mean? Yeah, well, not refuse necessarily, but I won't be able to say the right words. It's not going to make sense. It's a waste of time. Okay, so that would seem to be the case here. That's what he's talking about. Moses is telling God, I won't be able to say the proper words. So as you can imagine, at this point, Moses believes that he's a failure because he's not really accomplished anything that he thought he was supposed to accomplish. And we've all heard that phrase, if at first you don't succeed, try again. A lot of wisdom in that. Right? So many people want to give up quickly, and I admit I've done that before in my life. Got to have a little more tenacity, a little more determination, right? It's not always going to work right the first time or the second time, or, I want to give you the example of Thomas Edison, who, created these things and of the sorts, and electric light. And so there was a gathering, and everybody was breaking their arms, congratulating Edison, telling him how brilliant he was. You brought light where there was darkness. We don't need candles anymore. They were just telling Edison he was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And Edison looked at those people, and because they're like, you're a genius. This is incredible. He said, I'm not really that smart. What are you talking about? You invented the light bulb. What do you mean you're not that smart? He said, I'm not that smart. I'm just stubborn. He said, because I can tell you 1,000 ways how this won't work. And he wasn't exaggerating. He did over 1,000 experiments before he made the thing work. He just kept at it. He was convinced, I can figure this out. But he didn't. It's not like the first time he tried it or the 800th time he tried it. He just kept at it. He said, I'm not that smart. I'm just stubborn. I just stayed with it. Makes me look smart, but I just didn't want to give up. I was convinced I could figure it out sooner or later. So Moses just needs to keep going. God's in charge, and it's going to work the way it's supposed to work. God never promised immediate results for you and me or for Moses. So just trust God. He's going to do what he said on his own time. Okay? Pharaoh has to resist so that God's power can be realized, and that's exactly what's going to happen. All right, so let's look at verses 14 through 27. Basically, this is just an abbreviated genealogy, so obviously we're not going to go through all those names, but they're listing Leah's first three children, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. But the idea basically is to show the Israelites that Aaron and Moses, it shows their leadership position, that they're qualified to do this. That's why you see all these names listed through all these verses. The one verse I did want to call your attention to, verse 23 there, because we want to make note. Here we see the sons of Aaron, and obviously we're going to talk about them more. So Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So we're going to spend some time talking about them, the sons of Aaron. But the whole genealogy is just to prove they have legitimate leadership authority over the rest of the Israelites. All right, then verses 28 through 30, we see here that God repeats his instructions to Moses. Moses is still reluctant. He's still discouraged. But as we just said, perseverance is necessary. Right? And God prods him on. Everything's going to work. You just need to do what I told you. And the same thing is true for us today when we think about it. Did God tell us, if you'll just be baptized, once you're baptized, you're going to be on easy street? Did God tell us that? All your problems will be solved. Nothing bad will ever happen to you ever again because you're a child of mine, and so I'm going to... Is that what he said?
Oh, you're a child of mine, you will suffer persecution.
Yeah. Matthew 16:24. God never said it would be easy. In fact, he told us it's incredibly difficult. Then Jesus said unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. What is he telling us, take up our cross? What does that mean? How do I take up my cross? Yeah. I'm going to suffer. I'm going to be persecuted for his name. At least if I'm living right. If I'm really standing up for Christ, am I going to be mocked and ridiculed and persecuted for that? Better believe it. If nobody ever gives me a hard time about Jesus, that's because they don't even know I'm a Christian because I haven't. Right? So God said, hey, take up your cross, right? It's going to be a burden. 2 Timothy 4:7. Paul said, I've fought the good fight. I've finished my course. I've kept the faith. He likened it to a fight. It's a struggle. But he did it. And what did he say was waiting for him because of that? Crown of life, right? And not for me only, but for everybody who's faithful to God, for me and you, right? But it's going to be a struggle. Okay, if I think God's going to make it easy, then I don't understand God at all. And I've not really read the Bible. So one lesson for us that we can take out of this is we would all consider Moses a great man, and Moses is referred to even at the end in the book of Revelation. Right? So God considered Moses a great man. Was he perfect? No. But even great godly men like Moses, even they can get discouraged. So you and I can get discouraged in our faith, but we need to persevere. We can't let that make us quit and give up. And that's one thing about Moses. He got discouraged, but he didn't quit. He kept going. And that's what you and I have to do. There are times you're tempted just to throw up your hands and I just can't do this, but we got to persevere. If Moses can get discouraged, then I'm allowed to get discouraged too, but I got to battle through it. It's like Paul says, it's like a fight. You got to battle through it. Well, let's go to chapter 7. Verses 1 through 7. Now we're going to begin to see the 10 plagues that God is going to smite Egypt with. So God gives his final instructions to Moses before it begins. And here's how this is going to work. And so a lot of people, probably honestly, they just, maybe haven't read it carefully enough, but they talk, well, Moses is going to tell Pharaoh, and is that exactly how it happened? Well, God will speak to Moses. Moses will tell Aaron, and Aaron will tell Pharaoh. That's how God laid it out. Remember Moses, well, I'm not a good speaker. Now, that may or may not have been true, but as God said, Aaron's going to help you. So he told Moses, and he said, you tell Aaron, and Aaron will talk to Pharaoh. Now, I'm not saying Moses never said a word to Pharaoh, but apparently Aaron did a lot of the talking here because Moses was trying to use that excuse. Well, I'm not a great speech maker. Well, your brother's going to help you. God then tells them, you're going to go talk to Pharaoh. Hey, guess what, boys? You know what's going to happen? He's going to agree with everything you said, and he's going to let everybody go. Right? No. Let me let you boys in on a little secret. Pharaoh is going to be stubborn. He's going to resist. That's what's going to happen. So just be ready for it. But God tells him, this will allow me to demonstrate my power to both the Egyptians and the Israelites. And so we see that Moses and Aaron, they will obey God's command. They will go talk to Pharaoh. And they will tell Pharaoh what God tells them to say. All right, then in verses 8 through 13, here we see when they come before Pharaoh, the first miracle. So God had told Moses and Aaron, when you get to see Pharaoh, he's going to demand a miracle. He's going to want to see a magic trick. And you're going to show him one. And so this is where Aaron, we saw earlier, where he was given the rod, and you throw the rod down on the ground, what does it do? Turns into a serpent. So here we see Aaron throws the rod down before Pharaoh, and it does become a serpent. Now, Pharaoh calls in his magicians, and guess what they do? They do the same thing. They throw down some rods, and they turn into serpents too. So Pharaoh's magician, well, we can do that trick. That doesn't convince us of anything. Now, how did they do this? We don't know. We're not given any details. It just said they did it. Not obviously God didn't give them the power to do this. There's no evidence anywhere in the Bible that Satan would have the power to do that. Okay, again, it doesn't explain it. It just says they did it. So how can we look at this? Well, I think one possibility is if you look at, again, I didn't know much about this particular aspect of it until I started researching all this, but if you look at modern snake charmers, we already talked about you don't want to pick them up by the tail, you pick them up behind their head. Well, you can, apparently there's a way to pinch them behind their head and it paralyzes them and it stiffens them, kind of like they'd look like a stick. And then once they get out of that, then they would start with their, so maybe that's what they did. They knew how to do that and they made them look, they weren't really sticks. They were snakes the whole time. But when they first threw them down, it looked like a stick because they were stiff and they were paralyzed. And then they started wiggling around. Oh, see, we turned a stick into a snake too. So that might be a possible explanation. But we don't know because we're not given any details. Somehow they pulled off this magic trick. But the important thing is, what happened after that? Yeah, so the one that Aaron threw down, his serpent ate all the other ones. And in that way, God was demonstrating that his power was greater than the power of the Egyptian gods. Oh, you can do that? Well, I have power to even usurp whatever you're doing, whatever magic trick you're pulling. Okay? Now, Pharaoh is not convinced. And so the choice was Pharaoh's to make, but he's going to make a whole bunch of wrong choices until we finally get to the 10th plague. But it was his choice to make, but he's not going to make the right choices. All right, then verses 14 through 25, here's where we see the first plague. Now, as we said, there's no indication, he may have, but there's no indication in the Bible that God spoke directly to Aaron. Every time we see it, God tells Moses, and then Moses tells Aaron, and then Aaron goes and tells Pharaoh. So God tells Moses to instruct Aaron, here's what I want him to say, here's what I want him to do. And so they explain to Pharaoh what's going to happen because they've defied God. We told you need to do something, you wouldn't do it. So this is the first plague. They announce that all the water in Egypt will be turned to blood. And interesting, it says even the water that's already been collected into containers, that's going to turn to blood too. Like you've already got a container of water in your house to drink, well, that's going to become blood too. Not just the water in the Nile River, but we are told here that the fish in the river, in the ponds, they die. Because obviously they can't exist in blood, they exist in water. And it talks about the awful odor that they give off, that they're going to stink. And again, this is by design. All of these plagues are by design. God knows what he's doing. So what you see here is the Egyptians have lost their main water supply and also food because they ate a lot of fish out of the river. They've lost food and water that they are necessary for their survival. Again, God is demonstrating he's got power over life and death. And this is going to be one of the themes that we're going to look at, one of the things I want you to really understand. This is another example of God showing his power over the Egyptian gods. The Egyptians worshipped the Nile River itself as a god because it had water and water was life-giving. And right, so they worshiped the Nile River, the giver of life. Well, now what is it? Now it's giver of death. God did that. So you think this river is a god, well, I turned it into not life, but death. So again, God's showing his power over the so-called Egyptian gods. Now, it does say again that the magicians copied this somehow. Probably with, and we see in verse 24 that so they could get something to drink, the Egyptians started digging up water out of the sand like close to the river and they could get that and drink it. So this is probably what the magicians, they got some of that water and said they did the same thing, but did they actually turn it into blood? Or did they turn it red? Right? Are there chemicals or the things you can use to put in water to make it look like blood? Yeah, so that's probably what they did, but we don't know. It doesn't say. Just said they did a trick too, but probably something along those lines. So the first plague lasted for 7 days. Lasted for 7 days. Put that on up there. But Pharaoh's still not convinced to let the people go. And so we're going to see that as we progressively go through these plagues, they're going to get progressively worse as they go along. All right, so that brings us to chapter 8. Kathy, question? Okay. Yeah, anytime y'all have a question, just throw your hand up and I'll try to help you. All right, verses 1 through 15. We see the second plague. Pharaoh had not been given a warning, but this time he was. He's told about it ahead of time that this is going to happen. Didn't matter. He didn't believe him, so God tells Moses, well, go ahead with it. And so this is going to be the plague of frogs. And there had to have been, the way it's described, there must have been millions upon millions of frogs. So they were everywhere. So more than just a nuisance. They were in the houses. They were clinging all over the people. So interesting, again, the first plague, the waters of Egypt had been turned to blood and turned to death. Now the waters of Egypt brought forth an overabundance of life of the frogs, more than they could handle. Now, something to think about, because some people, you've probably heard or seen some people kind of ridicule this. They say, well, frogs, what's so bad about that? Right? Well, they are to me. I mean, some people love them. You know, I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to kill one, but slimy little things, you know. But still, you go, well, yeah, but they're harmless. Why wouldn't God have, you know, it's Egypt, man. They got crocodiles. Why wouldn't he rain down crocodiles? Or vipers, you know, venomous snakes. I mean, frogs. And you guys remember Underdog? The bird of playing a frog, right? So why didn't he make it something, a dangerous animal? Crocodile, snake, something like that. Why just a frog? Well, again, as always, God has a purpose. The point. Well, they will give you warts, that's for sure, yeah. God has a purpose. Guess what? Part of our theme again. The Egyptians had a frog-headed god or goddess, the goddess of fertility, that I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name because I can't pronounce it. But this was a frog-headed goddess of fertility. And so the Egyptians had seen frogs as a blessing. They were fertility. It was life. Now it's become a curse. Too much of a good thing, right? So once again, God is showing his authority over their so-called gods, over their pagan religion. Now the magicians, again, they claim that they copied this and they brought even more frogs. I don't know how you can tell if there's 100 million frogs. Well, now there's 101 million frogs. I don't know, but they said they brought even more frogs. So hey, we can do that too. But remember, 2 Thessalonians 2:9, the Bible talks about false miracles, kind of like those faith healers we see on TV today. If you'll send me $200, put your hand on the TV screen, I'll heal you. All right? But make sure you send me the $200. 2 Thessalonians 2:9, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders. False miracles. People that claim they can do things. So the magicians are trying to pull off these things, but as we're going to see, they're going to be defeated as well. And something else, and I don't know if this crossed Pharaoh's mind, but when you really think about it, so if the first plague, you get blood, all the water's blood, what do the magicians do? Well, they make more. Second plague, you got millions, a gazillion frogs, what do? They make more. Is that helpful? Why didn't they stop it?
Like throwing gas on.
Yeah, right? Well, the Nile turned to blood. Why don't you boys turn it back into water? Then I'll believe you. All these frogs, why don't you zap them and make them disappear? That'd be a miracle. Why didn't they do that? Well, because they couldn't. They could not cancel out what God had done. That was part of the point. Right? So all they did was, if they did anything, they made it worse. They didn't help the situation. So Pharaoh comes to realize that his magicians can't really stop it. So after this second plague, he asks Moses to ask God to stop it. So in a way, acknowledging that, yeah, your God is the only one that has the power to stop this. So he's admitting the power of God without openly coming out and say it, but that's what he's doing. So in an interesting thing, Moses even lets Pharaoh say, okay, well, I'll go to God on your behalf. Tell you what, I'll let you pick the time. You tell me when to tell God to stop it, and we'll stop it. So he even lets Pharaoh decide when. So that's kind of interesting. And so Pharaoh promised, if you'll do that, I'll release the people. But the frogs are destroyed, and of course they stink up the place. They have to get rid of them. And then what does Pharaoh do? Changes his mind. So once the danger is gone, and he quickly changes his mind. All right, verses 16 through 19. Let's see if we can get through this chapter. We see the third plague. This time Pharaoh's not. He was told about the frogs ahead of time, and now he's not warned about this one. And so Aaron smites the dust and turns it into lice. Very nice. And the lice then, of course, infested all the people, all the animals. And so beyond just the physical discomfort of that, of having lice, once again, there's a bigger purpose here. Because in the Egyptian pagan religion, their priests, if they had lice, they were not allowed to perform their priestly duties. They couldn't do it, according to the Egyptian religion. Okay, so the priests were not allowed to perform their worship service if they had lice. So again, this is another attack by God on their pagan religion. Now the the magicians, they try to copy this one, but they can't. They're unable to do it. They've run out of magic tricks. So it's at this point they were forced to admit defeat. And they told Pharaoh, this has to be an act of God. There's no other way to explain this. We can't do anything like that. Maybe Moses and Aaron are telling you the truth. Their God seems to have a power that we can't harness. So they tell Pharaoh that. What will Pharaoh do? Will he listen to them? Nope. He will not even heed the advice of his own magicians. So then we come to the fourth plague. On this one again, Pharaoh is warned about it. He comes out to bathe in the morning in the river, and he's told that, all right, the next day, you're going to be swarmed with flies if you don't let the people go, if you remain stubborn. Of course, he does remain stubborn. The flies come the next day. They're on the people. They're in the houses. It said they covered the ground. It was, so again, probably a gazillion flies. Now, there's a new development with this one. The area of Egypt where the Israelites lived was called Goshen. This was where they all lived separately from the Egyptians. And so God says this plague and all the future plagues will not impact Goshen. So for this one, there will be not a single fly in Goshen. So just the place where the Israelites live, it'll be clean, but there'll be flies everywhere else in Egypt, and that will be true for all the rest of the plagues. So they will impact the Egyptians only, not the Israelites. Because as we said, as we go on, the plagues are going to get worse and worse and more severe as we go along. Yeah, because it said like all the water in Egypt was turned to blood. Well, that would have been even in Goshen as well. And all the frogs, they were there as well. Right? But again, those weren't, and they were short-lived. It didn't last that long. And they were able to weather the storm. But as we go through, it's going to get increasingly horrifying, the things that are going to happen. And so from that point on, from this point on, God is going to protect them as another demonstration to the Pharaoh that, my people are going to be protected. It's going to be your people are going to be punished.
And just to understand something, but it's still conditional. Like if the people in Goshen, if those people didn't, like for example, last plague, if they didn't obey it to the letter, they were going to lose it.
Yes.
So it was
it's all conditional
on God's terms.
Right.
I just didn't. I wanted to make sure it wasn't like an umbrella. Like I'm going to protect them even if they don't.
No, they.
Yeah,
God was telling, as long as you obey me, you do what I was. Just like when they wander in the wilderness, right? I'm going to take care of you as long as you do what you're supposed to do. And then when they don't, they're going to get hammered. So, but at this point, they're crying out to God. He's like, okay, I'm going to show you and Pharaoh. That's what this is about. Okay. So notice in this one, neither Moses or Aaron used their rod like they had before. God just did this one himself. No way to think, some kind of magic trick or something. And then verses 25 through 32, we close out the chapter, we'll close out the class. Here Pharaoh, finally, he offers a compromise. So after we've gone through 4 plagues, he offers a compromise. So he offers Moses, says, look, I tell you what, if you'll get rid of this, I'll let you all worship. I'll give you a little bit of time off, and I'll let you worship your God. But I want you to do it here in Egypt. I don't want you going out in the wilderness, but I will let you do it here. If you'll call this off. Or get God to call this off. Well, Moses protests that to Pharaoh. That is totally unacceptable. Don't know if Pharaoh knew that or not, or really thought about it. I think he probably did. But Moses rejected that. He can't agree to it because he tells Pharaoh, and this is what I'm thinking Pharaoh would have had to have known this. He says, look, any and every animal that we would sacrifice, bulls, goats, whatever it is, any animals that we would sacrifice, that our God expects us to sacrifice, those are all sacred animals in Egypt. So if we start killing them right here in the middle of Egypt, and all the Egyptians are all around us and they see us murdering their sacred animals, what are they going to do? They're probably going to riot and they're going to kill us. Which I'm sure Pharaoh hadn't thought of that. He was probably hoping for that. Yeah, that way I can reduce your number that way. So Moses said, you got to be out of your mind. We can't do that here. That's why we need to go out into the wilderness to do what we need to do. Your people are probably going to riot if we were to try to do that here. So he doesn't agree to the terms. He's like, no, that's not going to work. In fact, there is an account of where the Persian army at one point, they had attacked Egypt, and that's what they did. When they attacked Egypt, they put in front of them all of Egypt's sacred animals. Really brilliant when you think about it. And they drove these animals in front of them as they charged the Egyptians, knowing that the Egyptian soldiers shooting their bow in it, they wouldn't shoot they wouldn't shoot their bows because they'd be afraid they'd hit the animals. And so the Persians were able to overrun them. That's really, really good strategy. Right? So Moses knew, yeah, they're going to stone us to death or whatever. They're going to kill us if we try to do this. And I think that's what Pharaoh probably was hoping would happen. So Moses says that they need to go 3 days out. Now, we can't do it here. We need to go 3 days out into the wilderness. So then Pharaoh agrees to let them go. Okay, well, I'll let you go out there. But he tells Moses, you can't go that far away. I'm not going to give you 3 days. Maybe a day. It doesn't say how long, but maybe a day or something. I'll let you go, but not that far. So he's starting to bend a little bit, but he's still not willing to give Moses what he wants. But Moses goes ahead and asks God to end the flies, and so he does. And when that happens, guess what Pharaoh does? He changes his mind again and says, oh, just kidding, I'm not going to let you go even a half a day. I'm not going to let you go at all. So he changes his mind. All right, which brings us to chapter 9. And I know we've already gone over, so we'll have to quit there. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. On chapter 9? What was, 16 through 19. Okay, so I think I got everybody's first set of questions. So the questions for chapters 3 through 6, they'll be due next week. And then I gave you tonight 7 through 10. They'll be due the week after next because we'll be able to finish 9 and 10 and go on next week. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. Y'all drive carefully on your way home.